Hello, 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 and welcome, meine Damen und Herren. I've got my cabaret head on tonight because we have the wonderful Doug Francisco, a bit of a legend from the Bristol and Festival and Underground creative people scene of circus fame, the Invisible Circus and Artspace Lifespace. So I first met Dougie and some of the Artspace crew back in West London in the very early 90s, and they were setting up spaces, doing a lot of arts and creative stuff. Artspace Lifespace does what it says on the tin, and they've evolved over the years into a charity and have had a massive success with getting a lot of spaces in Bristol and creating a lot of really incredible scenes of arts, creative, environmental, social change makers. So, without too much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, drum roll, going over to the man, the legend himself. We're very honoured, Doug Francisco. Hi, so Doug, thanks for coming.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, indeed. Indeed, it has been quite a journey thinking about it and thinking about talking about it. And yeah, I was reminiscing about where it all began back in those early days with spaces like the Rainbow Centre in the church and Cool Town in Brixton and yeah, West London. I started the first Artspace Lifespace project in like 1991, and we'd occupied an old shoe shop and kind of pretended not to be squatters and got a negotiation for a big old I think it was a halfway house, social services sort of halfway house building, a big old sort of semi-derelict building between the Westway and the Hammersmith and City tube lines where they Latimer Road there. And that was one of our the first sort of big projects, I guess, which had kind of evolved out of a few years of occupying spaces under the squatting laws. And then around 1993, I actually I went away for 3 weeks and then didn't come back for about 10 years. And was traveling with the Invisible Circus, sort of. That's how the circus sort of started. They're both kind of born out of that scene in West London. And yeah, I sort of accidentally didn't come back and started traveling with the circus and got to explore and experience a lot of different occupied spaces and projects in London as well. No, out of London rather. Like a lot of Spanish, traveling around Spanish projects. And the Spanish squat scene was so sort of like organized because it kind of had to be, because it was very kind of a different ball game in Spain, I guess. So it was very alternative and very well organized, and sort of they, made a lot of stuff happen, very productive and a lot more serious. There wasn't like, I remember they're all laughing when I was trying to explain that we just sort of stuck a bit of paper on the door and the police went away, and they were like, really? What, they just go away? Because like, yeah, I was staying in a place in Malaga and the police came and they're sort of hurling washing machines and bits of masonry off the roof and all this, and it was kind of like, and if they got in, then everyone would have been carted off to jail and stuff. But the activities and all the content that went on in those spaces was really kind of, the output was really high and the quality of what they did, and it was very engaging for everyone and very community orientated with communal food. And it was actually a space in Barcelona called Macabre, which was a massive big squat sort of factory area that I visited on the way back. I've been to Costa Rica actually, and my friend's wedding out there, and I spent the winter out there, and then we came back through Spain, and we'd met some acrobats or something like the year before, so we sort of knew these people that were based at Macabre. And as it turned out, kind of the bank kept my card, so I didn't have any money, and all of a sudden then I was just at this squat going, oh hi, we know these guys, and they're like, yeah, they're not here, do you know what I mean? And but got taken in sort of reluctantly, and then just experienced this massive project, and one of the things that struck me was all the different people that were there. Like we had this sort of, the black bloc anarchists were over here and they were all a bit serious, and but then at the same time you kind of go through another door and there's like tango workshops, and then the circus crew had a cabaret, and there's all these different sort of multifaceted spaces happening with a lot of different kind of people collaborating and cooperating, which really struck me and inspired me as well. Really, and yeah, and when we came back, yeah, we just moved to Bristol the year before, after sort of being in London, sort of returning to London in sort of 2000 and getting involved in some big crazy squat projects there. And I'd ended up doing another crazy summer season and sort of moved to Bristol because we'd met some Bristol crew that season at the festivals. And London was quite a challenging place to kind of, you're always setting things up, and you know, you'd have to kind of reinvent the wheel every time, and you get evicted from one area and you were nobody, you know, you go to a different area and they didn't know what you did or anything like that. So I suppose we sort of innocently came to Bristol, not realizing that Bristol obviously is a smaller city, so it's like one borough of London sort of taken out and dumped in the West Country. The same kind of scenes, of music scenes and everything, and easier to engage. You know, it's like the entire sort of creative community of a place, I suppose. So I think it was a good time to come to Bristol in that sense, I suppose. There's a lot of sort of, it's like a little zeitgeist moment or something. There's a lot of people floating around. There's always been a big community of people here, artists and musicians. You know, and it's kind of like the cool, ugly sister West Country version of London or something like that. And a lot of circus here because there's a circus school. So a lot of circus people came to London, came to Bristol, trained, and then would just stay in Bristol. So there's like international circus performers who never left and stuff because they like the city so much and the music culture and everything. So we kind of, I think we just came along and we were like the spark that lit the tinder that's going to set this whole situation ablaze a little bit by just occupying buildings. And the first one we did, it was like the extension out the back of a house, and that kind of got quickly, you know, the first event we did there was quite well attended. And we had a little cabaret upstairs, and there was this empty basement flat. We did a sort of site-specific bit of theatre in there. But then, yeah, the next time we did something, there was like hundreds of people there and people climbing over the walls, and we obviously needed a bigger, it's like the Jaws moment when you need a bigger boat. It's like we need a bigger squat because the audience was sort of really up for it. And there was a derelict car garages over the road. And it wasn't that destroyed at that point, but yeah, we had this mission to Costa Rica to go on. And by the time we got back, it was quite there's quite a lot more derelict. It had all the water pipes have been removed, you know, and weighed in, and the front door was kind of, there's no lock. I think someone had even nicked the lock and sold that, you know. And
was the first one where you met Ruth Essex on the council, or the Audi garage? The first one.
That was the Audi garage. We did, yeah, the Audi garage was the first big occupied site, and that was a squatted site. And that's when we first met Ruth Essex from the council. And she phoned me up, kind of sounding me out, I think. And then was like, oh yeah, well, I'll come down and have a look. And I was like, oh, you know, what name should I put on the door? And she's like, I just put Ruth from the council. And I was like, the council? And she's like, no, it's all right. I'm from the arts department. And yeah, she became a real big ally. And her thing was sort of like, it's so positive, no one can possibly object to it, you know. And that was the thing, I suppose. I was thinking about it today. We started scraping the graffiti off the windows with those little scraper things, you know, and did this open day because you know, squats can be quite intimidating to, you know, normal people or people that aren't used to alternative culture maybe. So all the neighbours that surrounded this huge building, the Audi garage was like a huge car showroom with a building above it and then a massive garage out the back. And the neighbours were obviously like, who are these crazies that have moved into this place? But we sort of, and then they were like, who are these crazy squatters that are cleaning graffiti off the windows? You know what I mean? Instead of spraying it on. And it was literally just because like we needed some natural light as well. So but then we had like an open day, and sort of loads of people came in then because their curiosity had been sort of piqued. And started doing cabarets and opening the space up for different people to have workshops and studios and stuff like that. And it was quite a good location. It's just at the top of Stokes Croft. So I had a lot of footfall. Sorry, get a bit more. A lot of footfall of people coming through. And that was probably one of the easiest sort of aspects of was its location. And then yeah, from there we kind of started to negotiate with the council and got our first police station, which was the kind of beautiful irony as well of the clowns taking over the police HQ. And that's when we set up the first kind of incarnation of Artspace Lifespace as a sort of legal entity, I guess. And like we you know, I'd use the same project name back in the early 90s and kind of and reinvented it for that reason, I guess, because I had a bit of history.
So that was a council building, that first police station, and did Ruth help you get that? Because
Yeah,
I'm going to share with other groups how, you know, trying to work out who in the council can really help you, and it seems like Ruth Essex really got in there for you and helped open to build. Who else did she talk to? Regeneration, and then that was a council.
yeah, you need an ally, like, and that's generally the arts and culture team, you know. And then they can kind of Ruth, a lot of the time we didn't, I don't know if we had any more buildings from the council. We have since now, but she became like a broker of the, you know, relationship broker or something, because she'd make those introductions to developers and other owners. And because someone from the council is making that introduction, that's obviously, you know, easier than them dealing with an unknown. Or like initially there was the whole thing of like the, you know, an owner can't legally really negotiate with someone that's occupied their building under the squatting rules, because they then are granting license and stuff. And so yeah, there's a sort of, that's one of the key factors, was Ruth kind of building those bridges, really. She was pretty crucial to that time. And we were, you know, we were still pretty kind of crazy squatter sort of approach to things then as well. You know, it's a lot different opening a building like legally with your name on it on the dotted line and all that, to kind of when you're occupying spaces. I mean, it's not actually that different in terms of making it safe, but like the implications are a lot more serious.
At what point did you get the legal entity then and start doing it that way?
After the Audi garage closed, we occupied a cinema for a bit, and then yeah, we were actually kind of going to squat the police station to start with, and then we're waiting for the council, and it always takes ages. Anything to do with councils takes a long time as well. So then half the team were like, "Let's just squat it." Like, no, we've got to squat it. You know, we've got to wait and negotiate this thing. And eventually they, you know, it was still a bit of a you know, worlds colliding there, to kind of, when we actually went to get the keys from the actual property department, they were kind of like, who is this lot? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, so it's still a bit of a collision of worlds. But then from there, we started, then we got the cathedral, which was like a proper eye-opener and challenging project. And I'd heard about this old cathedral in Clifton. I hadn't actually been to it, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's derelict," you know, and "Oh, it's a ruin." Do you know what I mean? And I mean, it kind of was a ruin, but you know, I was imagining like a few fallen temples and a bit of, you know, undergrowth, but it was still a building actually. And we were gonna kind of occupy it on the Friday, because there was builders on the site as well. So we were thinking to occupy it, put a show on Saturday, and then get out on Sunday. Do you know what I mean? In the old school tradition. And
Like a tight deadline then. That's quite.
yeah, you know.
You've got some pictures as well, haven't you, for the folks?
I have, yeah.
Hmm.
Do you want me to show you some pictures in a minute?
We love a good before and after shot of the Climate Merge Centre Network. Just the amazing transformations that go on through many of the different groups, from an empty building to be as a blank canvas of possibility. And you'll see with some of Dougie's photos the transformation they've done of, you know, all of our communities can see empty and derelict buildings, and they really should be a cooperation of all
Darius.
societies to help. I'm just going to mute. That might be BB.
Despite all of our good work preparing,
Yeah.
they've all disappeared now, so I'm going to have to open them again.
You're still a co-host. Yes, you are a co-host. Yep. Okay. Well, we'll find it. It's all right. So this cathedral, truly beautiful. One thing I've still got in the files is a booklet with about 12 shows they put on in, I don't know how many, a couple of months or more. They spent a long time fixing it up, and then got all of their mates in from all around Bristol to put on some incredible shows, cabarets, performances, theatre, all sorts of groups. And,
yeah, it took like, I mean, it took so long to actually open the building. It took like 7 months or something like that.
It does
Here we go.
longer going the legal route, but it's, you know, in the long term you can create some amazing stuff like you're going to see in these photos.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of implications, you know, like it was a cathedral. I mean, here we'll go back to the Audi garage a minute first, see if I can make this actually work. Yeah, so this is the old Audi garage buildings, and out the back of there was a sort of 4-level car park as well. And then we kind of boarded off that front to make a gallery shop front, so you could look in from the street, which is great for attracting, you know, interest and people, audiences as well. And then, you know, things like this was all just broken glass that was littering the place, so we just turned it into someone turned it into a work of art. You know what I mean? Beautiful thing.
Beautiful. We
got loads of fabrics. It's such a huge space, so we did stuff with fabrics a lot, just to kind of, because it's so hard to make an impression on such a massive space. So just sort of draping it out to make performance spaces in there, which all came from the scrap store.
Bristol
One
scrap
of the
store.
sets there. Like the smashed up car was sort of left in the garages, so we kind of painted that up and then turned it all into a street scene. And then got local painters that were in there kind of painting anyway, graffiti artists, just kind of, you know, made friends with them. Same as there's a lot of people in there sort of skating and stuff, and we just kind of let them carry on coming in to skate, and you know, got the painters to paint the place up as well. That's one by Zen's, who's a bit of a famous name now, but yeah, that was kind of on the Sunday, one of those Sunday mornings after the show kind of thing. I remember wandering up there, and there's all these people just watching him paint this paradise into this grubby urban landscape. So this is the cathedral. I managed to get the order wrong in my presentation because I'm so technically wondrous. So this is the cathedral actually set up for a show with all the sets and the rigging and circus show in there. And
amazing.
Yeah, so that's the same space, but kind of without any set in it. That was just after we'd finished the cleanup, which ended up, I mean, it was a proper mission, because it had just been there derelict for 30 years, so it was all full of pigeon shit, and probably why my lungs are so bad now. Yeah, and this is it set up with like the red carpet for an art exhibition and stuff. But before, I think coming up is, yeah, this is what it was like when we moved in.
That is incredible.
This is all like, huh?
That is incredible, really. I mean, the hard work we put into spaces to, you know, remember around the time talking to you guys, you had to, I think maybe the next picture of you all pigeon, you know, suits on to clear all this up, and then all the shows that happened. What a transformation.
Yeah, it was insane, and because it was a cathedral, we thought we'd be able to kind of like have 1,000 capacity shows, and you know, we'll all be rich, we'll make some money for the project. But because it was built 200 or 300 years ago or whatever, you know, they didn't have the same health and safety. So it turned out that because you could only fit two, it's taken from a Paris bus conductor after the war, weirdly, who weren't obviously weren't that big after the war. But yeah, because you could only fit 2 Paris bus conductors through the doors, you could only have 200 people in the place. which was a crushing blow, which we didn't find out until like 4 or 5 months into it or something like that. Whereas if you can fit 3 people, then you can have 1,000 capacity. But the doors were listed, so we couldn't change them either. It was a nightmare. So just when we'd done like 5 months work, and we're like, "Don't worry, guys, we're gonna make some money. We can pay everybody." Suddenly we were like, "Oh, you can only have 200 people a show in there." It's like, oh my God. But yeah, still, it was yeah. Here we are having fun, like pressure washing 30 years worth of pigeon shit out of the place or whatever. But yeah, we sort of, I mean, what was interesting, yeah, that's the building itself, which is mega.
Mm.
And you know, we were sort of looking around for another project, I guess. And I just the developer's number was outside on the board, so I phoned it up, pretending to be like a concerned neighbour, sort of curious as to when works were going to start. And I was just trying to sort of scope it out, you know, because we sort of wanted to just go in somewhere and do a big crazy show somewhere was our kind of thing. And he was really friendly and chatty, and we ended up chatting for ages, you know what I mean, about the place and the development and all this sort of stuff and the history of the place and everything. And then he asked me what my interest was. So I was just like, oh well, I was like, I'll just level with him, you know what I mean? I was like, oh, we're a local arts group, and we'd like to do something crazy in there. And he was like, well, oh wow, you know, come round for a meeting kind of thing. And there's this other kind of PR kind of dude who are usually, you know, not my most favorite people, but Richard, who's actually on the board of Artspace these days now. But he was another one of those bridge building people, because he could kind of put it in terms that the developers could understand, that it was kind of great PR for them to have this something happening in the building, make the building like accessible so people could, you know, they could swan their people in to show them round or any of that kind of stuff. You know, and give something back to the community in the meantime.
Those are really key 3 good points there, folks, for noting. Bridge builder, people who can liaise with the property people, and accessible for people to show around. It's good PR for the company, and you're giving back to the community. These are points to be made if you're negotiating with an owner. This is gold dust, Dougie. Keep it rolling.
Yeah, and then I can't remember how we worked it out with the funding. But yeah, I think Rich managed to sort of, you know, like we were trying to do the festival that you mentioned, which is a crazy program of stuff. So I think the Arts Council, whoever we got the funding with, would sort of match fund it. So if we could show that they'd spent so much money in kind, and if they put like 20 grand on the table, then the Arts Council would fund it to 20 grand as well, or more maybe, I can't remember. It was the first time we dealt with anything like that, and you know, and 20 grand sounds like a lot of money, but once you're trying to make that safe for the public, it doesn't go very far. But yeah, it did kind of fund the work to happen to make the place habitable for an audience, and they, you know, and the developers did put their money where their mouth was, you know, mildly reluctantly a little bit, but
So did you
we could show like all of the, you know, that this picture here is, you know, that was all, we've provided the labor and they provided the kit, and we cleaned it, because they kind of got a company to come in and clean it, but they only cleaned it up to sort of head height, or I think it was a film company were hiring it, so they just cleaned it up to here. But obviously all of the rafters and everything were covered in pigeon mess, you know what I mean?
Did you get a meanwhile lease or just a license agreement with them for 6 months or a certain amount of time? And then tell me, did that lead to, you met Urban Splash? Were they the developers? And then that led to the Spike Island old police station courthouse place?
Yeah, it's not Spike Island. Spike Island's like a different project, but the island, yeah.
The island.
Yeah, we'll come into that. This is the old theatre space as well. So there's that main space upstairs. And then downstairs, there's this crazy little theatre. This is it when we got there, and that's it when we did it up.
Woo.
quite a transformation as well. Again, we got the graffiti painters in to kind of paint the sets. So that was quite a transformation of the space. I mean, it was a dream venue really in many ways. Yeah, that's it. Another before shot, you know.
Incredible. Wow.
And then yeah, we hiring this machine, which made all the work possible upstairs as well. That all came through sort of being funded really. Yeah, there's the gang. Team clean.
Yay. Stars.
Yeah, so the final show we did there is another using fabrics for the sets again as well. But yeah, that I think that Roos again made the introductions with Urban Splash, who owned the island, which was an entire kind of police and law courts building. That's one of the show pictures there that we ended up doing. So using the architecture of that space. I've got a picture. I'm sorry they're all in the wrong order. I'm just going to flash through them in a minute. Try and find the one I'm looking for. This one. So yeah, this entire site was a police station, a law courts, and a fire station, and a CID building as well. So that's like an entire city block, and it was one of those sort of it's way too big. You know, we had that a lot with the Audi garage. Everyone was like, it's too big and it's too far gone. And we were like, we don't care. We just want to do shows. And then the cathedral was the same thing. And you know, they were right really as well. You know, it was too much. And we weren't well resourced enough and all that. But still, and then this came along, which was again, everyone we talked to kind of suggested that it was too big, and it was, you know what I mean. But again, it's just that sort of a space was such an opportunity for a performance.
Yeah, dream big, and you did. You reached for the stars, and you've created many stars. You know.
Well, yes, indeed. That's one way of looking at it. But yeah, exactly, and it's also like I don't know, culture or the like, you know, you have to. I remember my friend was sort of at the Audi garage was talking about how he wished he'd been alive in the 60s when things were so alternative and bohemian. I was like, you have to kind of, you've got to make your own bohemia, you know what I mean? So grab this vacuum cleaner and let's go downstairs sort of thing.
Failed him.
But yeah, so I mean, another really interesting thing, Helen Crocker, who was from Circus Media and had done a show in that cathedral before, came and had words with us. And she said a few things that really struck home. One of them was like, you think it's huge, but it's huge. You know, the project and the scale of that. And she's like, if you fuck it up, if you mess it up, you're not just messing it up for you're messing it up for anyone in Bristol that wants to do anything like this ever again. Do you know what I mean? And that was quite a sort of moment.
No pressure.
That is the situation. Do you know what I mean? So that was quite a good lesson for us to have at that point. So we took it very seriously in terms of, you know, doing everything by the book and making sure it was worth it. You know, it's got to count. If you're gonna do this service for property developers and people as well, and councils, you know, it's got to be worth it from the other side, not just because you want to make a show or you want to live in a crazy space or whatever. And this was one of the big shows we did there that you came down to, Phoenix, using the architecture. And then this is a more ground-based thing, that's building the set into that courtyard. So it gives you like amazing, you know, it's an amazing resource, these kind of alternative spaces, and they are getting fewer and further between, but you can then gather people in them. And it was vast. And we've still got Artspace still has the police station with artist studios in there like now. And that was a temporary project. That was a 6-month project. They wanted a 6-month lease, or I think maybe it was 18 months they gave us originally. You know, and we're still there like 18 or 15 years later.
Wow.
So that is the kind of one of the more successful ones. But, you know, we've got new landlords and the rents are getting are pushing it so far that we might not be there for that much longer. Well, our other projects are having to subsidize the rent on that one because it's been our flagship and we've been there so long. But yes, there's another internal space in the building. And then, yeah, training spaces and stuff that we set up as well. Obviously, the cells in the police station were like evocative spaces.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just some of the shows at night. That's, I mean, it's such an atmospheric space.
That first show was epic. There was people like running around the walls on like, aerial lines and juggling fire,
Yeah,
breathing, and packed with crowd. It was off the chart. That first show was such, there we go,
yeah,
phenomenal.
that's the wall runners there. Yeah, I
Mm.
mean, that's the thing, I suppose. That was I mean, Circus is really good for that because everyone's got a relationship with Circus. Everyone knows what it is. Everyone, like English people are terrible and they don't know what to do, aren't they? But everyone knows what to do at the Circus a bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And years ago, when we did the first projects in London, Tony Spencer was a bridge builder back then who worked at a local housing trust. And he was like, if you can get their, he was like, if you can get their children, then their parents have to come and buy into it. You know what I mean? Not to be putting it brutally, but like if you can kind of, if the kids want to come, then the parents will come. And if the parents come, then the grandparents will come. And everybody loves you. Do you know what I mean? So we started out, we did kids events and we did stuff for old age pensioners. Because who can argue with that, really? And then if so we'd start out with that kind of an approach of doing stuff for the kids, for youth work, and and also doing stuff for, like, we had like they're bringing in old age pensioners from the old people's home on buses, who were coming into the yard like clinging to their handbags, going like, "Oh my God, get us out of here! It's Mad Max!" And by the end, they were kind of like stealing artwork and crying and fucking hugging everyone. But yeah, that was a true thing, So like because so like if their kids love you and their parents love you, they have to love you and accept you. You know what I mean? And Circus is very good for that because it's it's a very common people kind of thing. It's not elitist. It's very inspirational because of its nature of like physicality and people, people expanding on what the norms of what we think we can do. And it's a very good, it's a very good way of bringing people together. So that's what worked for us as well. Even though we're not traditional, we're not traditional circus, we're not contemporary circus, but we have used circus as a kind of its original thing, which is bringing people together, and everyone's got a relationship with it. You know what I mean? So any of those sort of activities, like, yeah, other things are more, I don't know, there's not very much that is as open and can appeal to so many different people as circus. Do you know what I mean? Everything else has got its niche, isn't it? Like dance or theatre. Theatre can be quite aloof, you know what I mean? Or not everyone will go to the theatre. And likewise with what we did there, we mixed circus, we used circus and theatre to create these sort of events and parties. And yeah, the thing was that the older generation would come for the show and they wouldn't normally go to a party, and the younger generation would come to the party, but they wouldn't normally go to a show. And then suddenly you had them all there together, and that's kind of where
Nice.
that brings everyone together. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of like the folklore part of it, and carnival, the tradition of carnival where everyone can be who they want to be for a night and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
So that was one of the most powerful things, I suppose, of galvanizing everybody around these events. And like I said, because we've done all the other kind of stuff, no one's going to object to these beautiful performance-based extravaganzas. You know what I mean? Whereas
So
if you just had a party, people would be going, "Oh no, it's a party," like
She managed to get a few other buildings from there. There was the Arts Mansion, a few others. Do you want to say a little bit about getting the other buildings and how they, and also maybe a bit about the Sparks in Bristol, which I know you in Artspace are involved with
Yeah,
group, Global Vision, is it? And wow, look
yeah. I'm
at
just gonna get another glass of water a minute. Hold on.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you can
I
see.
suppose
Mhm.
what's funny is that like this one in the city centre, everybody still talks about it, like 15 or 20 years later. And the project that's there, a youth project, bought the site in the end, and they like everyone they show around, someone always says, "Did I come to a crazy thing here?" Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like a lot of the other things that we've done have ridden on the coattails of that. There's a bit of a crew picture from those days. So
Wow.
that was kind of there was over 200 crew and performers involved in that show, in those shows there. Um, and that was another thing, I suppose. It reached out and it brought a community together. We weren't, there's me and Wim and our respective partners like Sarah and Shelley, and we were a tiny group really, four of us. And we came to Bristol because we met a few other people, so maybe there was like 10 people in the troupe. But very quickly it became this mass thing and everybody got involved. And then you've got a community. So everything that's sort of happened since is in some ways from the work we did then, I guess. And yeah, Artspace was we started off as a co-op, and then we changed it into a CIC, and then we again transformed it then into a charity. And I guess this was a tricky project. A lot of people, we had a clap like trying to set up Artspace. The circus set up Artspace, but then the circus would be, rubbing up against it the wrong way sometimes because the circus crew were all, a lot of people living on the site, and at the same time we're trying to run a more official arts project, and all these sort of things would rub up against each other sometimes. And you'd also had the thing of like, you know it from squat projects, you've got a really big unwieldy group that are all there for maybe different reasons and stuff. Do you know what I mean? So trying to get that focus of like making sure everybody's on the same page and there for the same reasons to do the same thing. The show was really good for that because everybody knows what they want to do and what they're doing it for.
Mm.
But sometimes the decision-making processes, and you have communal work days where everybody's going to work, but then only 20% of the people show up to do the work bits, and all that sort of stuff was
Yeah,
hard to manage.
it's one of the
Which
things we had early
ultimately,
on in the handbook
hey,
about having living space or project space, and how much art living space and creative space and community space can affect each other. It's good to have
yeah, and
entertain the
we started to
finding the
we
balance.
started to charge for space more and pay people for roles because trying to do it all voluntarily was really a struggle a lot of the time because you had an undefined amount of commitment from different people. So a few of you were being like properly worked to death, trying to hold the thing up, you know what I mean? And so we separated the two things as well. The circus and Artspace physically became more separate, and Artspace became more official and still negotiates for spaces and hires them at affordable prices, and has had a lot of different. Yeah, we've had a project in the basement of the town hall and the ground floor of the town hall with the vestibules, and Ashton Court Mansion, which is a really kind of, well, a bit of a crumbling edifice, but a very sort of an iconic Bristol landmark. We've kind of had that to caretake for the last couple of years.
Nice. That's a word we used a lot over the years. Caretaking. We take care of buildings. Do you want to say a little bit about the Sparks, and then I'm sure the folks have got some questions there because it's been really exciting presentation with a real journey. What you've just been saying about, the evolution of projects, they do go through a long evolution, and we've seen a lot of that tonight with what Dougie's been describing. Do you want to say a little bit about Sparks, Dougie, and then we'll go for some
Yeah,
questions?
I mean, Sparks has been a recent thing as the high streets are starting to kind of close down, and so there's a moment to, and that is really the last communal space that we've got. And even though it's very commercially driven, those city centre high streets, which are kind of shutting down and will be redeveloped ultimately, so what do you want that to turn into? And there's an opportunity for that to turn into a new a blossoming of community, an alternative, living, isn't there? And exploring the solutions that we need to look at in the heart of that commercialism. So it's quite funny in Bristol in a way, because all the artists have been getting forced slowly further out by the gentrification of the city centre, and not just artists, like communities, St. Paul's community has been, sort of encouraging people to move out to these suburban areas by saying there'll be great travel links and more shops, and incentivizing it because the real estate in the city centre is worth a lot more to sell to, to be gentrified. But then suddenly, sort of 10, 15 years later, it's the core is rotten again, and now the city centres are emptying. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of an interesting time, as now they're kind of going, oh, we'll get the artists in again. Do you know what I mean? So there's a kind of the battle for the heart of the cities is kind of waiting to happen. And that's kind of where, I guess, where Sparks came from, was that Marks and Spencer's closed down after having a site there for, I can't remember how long it's been there now, but it's a proper old school building. And the council, it came via the council that they were looking for organisations, and the Global Goals charity and Artspace Lifespace both pitched for it, and the council did a classic where they sort of they shared the information of who each other were, but it was a wrong web link or something. So when we looked up the Global Goals charity, it was these people recycling filing cabinets in Manchester or something like that, and then they looked us up, and we were like some kids charity in Peterborough they saw, or something like this, and they were like, oh, how weird. But once we discovered that we were both actually in Bristol, and the Global Goals charity hadn't actually done anything in a building before, so then we decided that we would, offer to take it on as a joint project, basically. So the two charities teamed up to take that on, and again, it's been a massive learning curve for many reasons. And it's awesome because you walk in the ground floor, and it's just all these independent traders and and alternative stuff, and environmentally workshops and things going on. But it was, the owners just decommissioned it like they were decommissioning a building to mothball it.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, and things like that. So yeah, if you're in that negotiation at that point, just making sure that they don't just kind of close it down like they're going to close down anywhere that they normally would. Because then you have to also use their contractors to fix anything, and their contractors are like 800 quid a day and things like this. You know what I mean? It's crazy situations you find in.
Looking through all the contracts before and things, and not signing yourself into something very difficult. It's always good to get a proper lawyer and any other experienced groups to help you looking through things.
Yeah, and the nature of meanwhile use as well, as like we were.
Let's say about that, and then we'll hop to questions. Meanwhile use or long term?
Well, I mean, like I said, the island's been there 15 years later, it's still there. So, but that whole tension between that is like we took Sparks on confident that we would get it for longer, because of that's what, there's various people were saying the city centre is not going to be redeveloped for 5 or 10 years at least. And still it was a gamble on a 1-year lease, but that has been renewed. But yeah, meanwhile, like meanwhile that most places are being bought and gentrified. So that meanwhile was great like 10 or 15 years ago, because there was a lot of property sitting around and there was a real, you know, glut in that kind of process, wasn't there? The property market was, you know, was slack. But these days it's not really like that. So you have to kind of think about the legacy of what you're doing as well, which we're kind of at the final frontier now, kind of battling for that, because the circus is about to get evicted from its production base because it's being turned into flats, and there aren't loads of places to go, there aren't loads of options, and there aren't, you know, everything's top dollar, because it could suddenly, Bristol's like, you know, the number one place to move to in the country or whatever, or I can't, you know,
Because you've
something
made
like
it so
that.
cool, Dougie.
Exactly, that's the thing,
All
you got
the
to watch
price.
it. Yeah?
No.
Whereas, you know, 20 years ago, they were offering to sell us the CID building and that block for like 60 grand. And we were like, no, we won't be here in 5 years. What are you on about? But, you know, sure enough, most of us are here 15 years later, paying like extortionate rents.
You're an institution now in Bristol. You're a pillar of the community, bruv. I mean, there's so much more could be said, but thank you so much. A really informative journey, and I hope it's helped many of our groups, and others will watch this recorded afterwards. If anyone's got any questions for Dougie, if they want to use the reactions button down the bottom, you can stick a hand up like that. That helps us. Maybe in a second, stop sharing your screen. Yeah.
I will, yeah.
So yeah, any questions for Dougie and about that journey? What an incredible journey! It shows what can be done with an empty building, really, and the hub of creativity they become for everything from, you know, arts to community to environment to social. It helps on many levels. So over to the assembled community challenge panel. I think Cornwall first. Zoe, clandestine insurgent rebel clown army.
Well, yeah, I was trying to remember that. Some of those images look so familiar from Strange Days in Bristol, like you were saying 15, 20 years ago. But yeah, I'm really intrigued as what something that Phoenix was just saying. Like, is it really true that by turning up and doing that work that you really kind of transformed the vibe of Bristol? Because I have noticed over those years of passing through there does seem to be more and more of that slightly kind of wild, edgy, circusy, but also it's known as like the greenest, sort of the green city, and you know, getting a green mayor and all these sorts of things. So just what do you feel has been the impact culturally and socially on the city of your work there? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the temptation is to go, oh no, governor, it wasn't us. But actually, yeah, that was a massive thing, I think, and you know, not just us as well, but we did kind of spark the fire there. But I think that has had a massive impact on why people want to move there and why it's become, you know, and it's the classic that's been happening for centuries, hasn't it? It happened in, you know, in West London. It's almost like it's following us. You know what I mean? Like I left West London, next thing Madonna had moved in, the whole place went south, you know. But yeah, that culture and that alternative culture, the real buzz, you know, people were like, oh my God, I'm moving to Bristol, do you know what I mean? Just because they've been to those sort of spaces and there's so much different alternative stuff to do, which, you know, is still the case, but like not as prolific and not as accessible as it was, because everything's got more of a price tag on it, I guess. But yeah, I would definitely say that, you know, funnily enough, I mean, we are like, squat culture is cool now, isn't it? Suddenly everyone's harking back to like how great Spiral Tribe was and the raves and all this sort of stuff. And you're like, hold on a minute, we were outlawed and driven out of the country and stuff, weren't you? You know what I mean? And all of that squat culture, not just the rave scene, not like you see it in interior design. They don't bother finishing buildings, do they? Because it's sort of it's a bit squatty and it's like shabby chic and all this stuff. You know what I mean?
Double price.
Even saving the planet is hip these days, Phoenix.
We've made it mainstream, darling. Over to Anna in sunny Islington. I think who's got a question there. University Challenge Panel, Islington.
Hiya. Thanks for that. That's super interesting. When I came to Sparks, my favourite bit of it, right, was driving the bus. I loved driving the bus. I've got loads of photos of me driving the bus. How did you get the bus sorted? That's one question. Can I just come back with something else? Somebody else seeded an idea in my mind 3 weeks ago, and I don't know how to make it happen. but I think there might be some people in here who might know how to make it happen. And they said it was an old action from years ago where they opened up a squatters estate agents. And I was thinking, oh, I mean, we don't even have to make it a real one, right? But if we had a squatters estate agents and we managed to, I don't know, get it in the news somehow, then it would be really great for highlighting what we're seeing, where no young people can afford to live anywhere, certainly in London and more in Bristol. So those are my two questions. I know, sorry, that's a bit greedy.
That's all right.
But
The
yeah, there you go.
The bus was fun to try and get in the building. It came in sections, and First West sponsored the project a bit and did want to put a transport hub bit in there and encourage people to use the buses more. So they provided the bus and a bit of sponsorship towards the project for getting it in there. And the squatter estate agent, yeah, funnily with our last show that we just did at the Unit 15, because we're getting evicted, we did a load of stuff about that and sort of set up these fake estate agents and stuff in there. So some sort of, whether you, I don't know how you do it, it depends on what level you want to do it, but you could get permission for a temporary use installation in a shop that's closed down in a shopping centre, and then set up a piss take estate agents that's actually got all the empty buildings in that city or whatever, I guess. There's one way of doing it, or you could occupy a shop and do the same sort of thing. And then, in terms of getting on the news, it's probably as much about getting on TikTok and all that sort of stuff, isn't it? That's the thing with its performance and comedy wise, then you can put it online. And maybe, yeah, we had Graham Dreary. Graham Dreary was our estate agent at the show. And there's another one, Honey Bone, was this sort of honey sweet, and it was like you had to do this impossible test to get your eligibility to be able to afford a flat. So I'm using comedy and something visual that's going to kind of go well online. And then either negotiating for a space just to do it as a one-off, or just occupying one would be my advice.
So coming over to Ben in a sec, there was a question, but just so we put it in the chat, there was a 1996 Schnews newsletter group in Brighton. They did a squatters estate agency, and just to big up Dougie, that last show they did at their Circus space, there was a list of all the kind of amazing spaces in Bristol, including ones that had been lost or venues that had been lost and buildings.
The cultural graveyard.
Cultural graveyard. London has lost 50% of its music venues in the last 10 years. We need arts, community use, community centres, environment centres. Over to Ben. Lovely to see you, Ben.
Hello, Phoenix. Hello, Doug.
Hi,
Ben. Hello, mate. I just want to advocate for Doug and the Artspace Lifespace scene. Yeah, really kickstarting or helping ignite, what was already burning away in Bristol. It just added fuel to the fire. And I remember Doug coming by to Bristol Wood Recycling Project, which is 20 years old now, and Doug coming by in the early days, and they'd occupied the Audi garage and were trying to find wood, and going on to the parties and events at the Pro Cathedral and the stuff at the island, and this scene growing and growing and growing. And it's such an amazing story that not only is the island still there hanging on, but you have all these other scenes, properties, and the trust that you've built up, and the fact that when it was the Green Capital launch, I think you might have even had some performance there. You have really been a huge part of Bristol's scene for a long time, and it's amazing. And now you're part of Sparks, and it's a very interesting point you've got about the center of the city, what's going to happen there, what's going to happen with the development around there. And when the Tories are gone and Labour come in, which I'm sure will happen, they're going to be inheriting such a mess. I hope that you're still going to be in there one way or another in these places. And where we are, I mean, strangely, we've kind of been twinned as in Bristol Wood Recycling Project and Invisible Circus in a way, because where you've been in St Phillips, we've had the opportunity to buy a site, and it's really sad that you're having to leave there. And all around where we are, as you well know, but everyone else won't, it's just turning into flats, student flats. That's a big part of the economy of the city now, is accommodation for students. And there are still, if it's not student flats, it's offices, and the offices that they're building, they're still empty. They've got these big offices which are empty, and now I'm told by a mate of mine who works there that they're now converting those offices which are empty, they're now converting them into housing as well, and they're still building more offices. So
Probably student flats.
it's I suppose the question is, do you feel that, what hope have you got within you that there are these places that will remain to be occupied? Because we see the development happening, but maybe, it's the build it and they will come theory. I've got a feeling it's going to just run hollow. So I wonder what feelings you've got or thoughts you've got about where your place might be in the future in the city or beyond.
Well, I think now's the final dallying of swords really is about to come down, isn't it? It's because the spaces are running out and being bought up. So there's the only and councils are going bankrupt. So the only money that is going to come in for culture is going to come from these developers that are buying the places up, and more long-term kind of provision for culture. So that is really down to the council policies and the investment of that kind of sector coming in, because the days of there being a lot of empty properties to play with, certainly around here, are over probably. And I think that's what people should be aware of wherever you are, is that that sort of gentrification, economic redevelopment thing, because it doesn't matter if the offices are empty, because it's the money's invested in that structure. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of money sat there. It's a way of dumping tax, basically, isn't it, for the people that are, that's why they invest in property. Basically, it's an asset. Then it's not money. So if the economy goes, or the interest rates go up, or whatever happens, they've got a solid asset. So that's why they put mirrored windows on them, Ben, so no one can see that they're empty. So I think it's like it is the final frontier and the final battle really that's what I'm talking about, by the city centre and by projects needing to think longer term and think about, like the wood recycling projects managed to do, is like buy those spaces and put the pressure on for community purchases and stuff like that, because now is the time, because it's not the golden days are long gone, my friend.
This is a conversation that's happening around the network, and we did have Dan from Hamilton House on about how they built up Hamilton House for so many years, and then issues with developers and things, and also the other month Dan from Interim Spaces and their charity, how they're transitioning from meanwhile leases to community ownership fund and trying to buy buildings back for the community. I think the Bristol Commons and Dan from Hamilton House are talking about how to restore spaces to the commons. How can we get community benefit societies or community land trusts and club in with our money to buy back some of these community buildings so that they are here in 10, 20, 30 years time, rather than having to move out in a year or two. We're going to roll till about 10 past or so, because it's fascinating tonight. If anyone has got anyone who hasn't spoken particularly, and you got a feedback, a question, doesn't have to be a question, it could be a feedback, what you thought of tonight. Was that BB? Did you have a hand there? Yep, go for it. BB, are you in Bristol, did you say? Unmute.
Cool. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm at the People's Republic Estates Croft, and we've set up a co-op, which is more than 300 odd people have bought into and have bought our building. But we're still facing the same. The gentrification still means the prices have gone up. The land trust have had to use some commercial borrowing to buy the building. We're still kind of under those same cost pressures, even though in theory we kind of are in charge of our space to some extent, or at least we've got a very useful, friendly, helpful landlord now.
Yeah.
I'm just, but I'm wondering, is there? It almost feels like we should be abandoning the city centres to these kind of commercial deserts and just let them fucking have it. And several people have said in this, about the PRSC here in States Croft, if we'd done this a decade ago, it would have been great, and we'd have been a bastion and be able to push back and hold back a bit more. And now, like, we as an organization that's never really been money focused or like commercially interested in how and making money, we're like ending up with our rents going up, with the other thing, like, meaning we have to be more commercially focused, which is really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah,
Quite a question. Is there a way, do you see a route through all this? Like,
yeah, it's hard, especially the sort of having to be more commercially driven to make the payments, to do the things, you know what I mean? And that's always been a bit of a compromise. The more established you become, the more that has to be the focus, and that doesn't necessarily make for good art or good community. Like, if it has to be commercially viable, like, what, you know, what's that about? I mean, I'm not sure if I can see a way through or not. I just sort of relentlessly carry on, hoping for the best.
Keep going, never give up.
I don't know what else to do. And try to sort of, yeah, try to rattle the cages. I mean, we're rattling the cages a lot now because we're kind of being evicted potentially, like, out of the city if no one comes up with anything, because we don't have enough reserves to kind of buy a place or anything like that. So we've been playing it a little bit quiet, but then the planning application on our site was in, and it was fairly quiet and then with a week to go, suddenly people started commenting, and then there's like 660 comments have gone in or something like this. Yeah, and we're quite neutral about it because we're like, it's not like, oh, you know, save our project or our building or us particularly. It's the bigger picture of what's going to happen in Bristol. So using that as a bit of a platform to kind of rattle the cages and prod the powers that be, but who can tell what the way through is, I guess. And like, especially once you're tied into a purchase situation, yeah, you are going to have to do that for a while. And I guess just try not to, you know, even if that pushes you in that direction for a bit, hopefully it's just like losing sight of it. Organizations carry on, some people leave, new board members come in, suddenly, you know, it's like Spike Island was occupied by a bunch of crazy artists in the 70s, and now it's quite, you know, it's pretty exclusive art space that's quite hard to get into. You know what I mean? And that happens a lot. You'll see those things that were really grassroots sort of becoming more exclusive. So I guess just have eyes on
Anna's
that.
got one there, Dougie, sorry.
Hey?
Anna's got a question, feedback or something there, and then we're going to wrap up soonish, but it's brilliant. I want more, but Anna.
It's just to ask other people's thoughts on, because I see where we are now, where everybody's got offices, but nobody's going to work in those offices. And very soon, all of that is going to collapse, I think, because people don't want to work in offices. And so then for us to be ready to occupy those big spaces, I think is really important. And maybe this is the rantings of a madwoman, right? But it's not going to last like this, because it's all going to, you know, nobody wants to work in an office. Who wants to work? Nobody goes to offices.
There's been a big shift from lockdown, and I know that even, like, I think the civil service was selling off loads of offices in central London because nobody's coming in. They're all Zooming to work now a lot more. I think Zoe's got a great point there. Zoe, do you want to make that point? I think it's fantastic.
Which point was that? About cultural heritage?
Yeah, we are. Come on, protect us.
Definitely. I mean, you know, I don't know if you've had dealings over the years with the Arts Council and with councils. I don't know if it's worth, describing it that way and saying that you should be able to be present in Bristol, or at least have some sort of presence. I don't know.
Yeah,
there is a thing about them not closing down current cultural spaces, you know, and that's, you know, that is a thing that they're trying to sort of, suddenly their policies are moving towards, like, oh shit, we better protect culture. So there is a moment for that, totally. And I mean, like 20 years ago, Phoenix, would we ever have thought there'd be loads of grannies gluing themselves to the road about the planet? You know what I mean? When there's just like a handful of us getting beaten up by policemen all the time. No, we wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? So like, I'm quite hopeful that as you say, though, if things are going to kind of collapse and fall down, at least, you know, no one's better placed to be there to pick up the pieces than us lot.
We have been through the rubble at the crumbling of the edge of civilization for 30 years, asking councils, developers, owners and all sorts of people to let us have this space to create absolutely vital community, environmental, arts, cultural spaces. And we've had a lot of success. We've negotiated a lot of deals, and I suppose the Climate Emergency Centre Network is partly only what it is because the 30 years of that journey. You know, our group started off after the 92 Rio Earth Summit, and you have to be relentless. You have to keep going. You have to keep asking councils and owners for these spaces, because we've seen tonight, ladies and gentlemen, the magic that can happen when you give that empty and locked up building that is, we can all see in our communities, that sat there derelict, padlocked, boards on the windows, metal on the windows. And if you let a wonderful wide diversity of people and groups come in and do something, it's actually what we're trying to do is prove this is good for not just community, but the environment, the social, the you know, all different sorts of economic things, you know, headology. It's much better for your community to build a climate, you know, resilient community and network and community. It's not just about the environmental crisis, it's about the social crisis, how we help each other with the cost of living and stuff. And I hope that we've shown it with the climate emergency centres, you know, around the country now, 25 odd of them, and more opening up all the time. Dougie, you want to come over to you for final words of wisdom from the wonderful, inspirational cabaret compound?
Oh yeah,
Dougie.
I mean, I just interrupting you there, going, there is a lot more awareness of that now, isn't there? That's why you've got climate emergency centres. That's why we've done what we've done in Bristol. That's why Statescraft are buying, you know, you're buying property. So, and there's a lot more openness. You know, things are a lot more possible than they've ever been before. And yeah, some of us have been living in post-apocalyptic conditions for fucking decades, haven't we? So
it kind of makes you chuckle when they keep going on about the collapse, because the collapse isn't a funny place to be all the time. It's actually, we need to work on the solutions. We need
I think the solution, like you know, we are the solutions. Like solutions are happening as well. There's, like I said, there's more people living better than we've ever lived before in the history of humankind. It's worth bearing in mind as well, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's just we've got a lot more feed of like information and media that's kind of telling you how shit everything is everywhere, but you know, actually things are, you know, things are a lot better than they've been probably.
We have to have hope and be the change you wish to see. And what a lot of these climate emergency centres are doing is showing to Joe and Jane public on the high street solutions and good projects, and linking people up and building a resilient community. It's a bit of a conversation we had with a couple of groups that want to set up new centres this week, and they were saying if things are getting worse in the future, one of the best things you want to do is know your neighbours and have community spaces where you can cooperate, share and get together and be more resilient. Ladies and gentlemen, for winding up, something from the Trust the People, if you want to put 2 or 3 words into the chat of what you thought of tonight. And I'm going to hand over Dougie for passing last word of wisdom in there. But thank you, Dougie, so much for coming. Really inspiring the wider network with what you're doing in Bristol. And let's all link up more and help each other, mutual aid and cooperation. Over to Dougie. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thanks for coming along, everyone. And yeah, it is inspiring. And I was inspired to come and do this just because of, knowing that all these spaces are opening up around the country is a really, really inspiring thing. So keep up the good work, keep fighting the good fight, and let's go on tour, Phoenix. Where's this tour you keep doing? Yeah,
come on. Well, we've got 14 locations coming up, Dougie, which we'll speak about this afterwards. We are taking it around the country. So Dougie wants to help us put shows together, and we'll come and visit your climate emergency centre. Ladies and gentlemen, last comments, whatever you want, beam them out. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you very much for words of wisdom for Dougie and everyone who came tonight. Anything you want to say? I'll just...
All right.